The wrench slipped from Roy's hand and clattered across the metal floor of his repair bay. He wiped the grease from his forehead and stared at the Draken merchant vessel docked outside his workshop window. The ship itself needed minor repairs, nothing unusual. What caught his attention were the angry voices echoing through the station corridor. Roy grabbed a rag and stepped outside. 3 Drakens stood near the airlock, their scaled bodies towering over the human station manager. Their golden eyes blazed with frustration as they gestured wildly at a small crate between them. "This thing cannot remain on our ship," the largest Draken hissed. His dark red scales gleamed under the harsh station lights. "It is cursed, a blight upon our clutch." The station manager crossed his arms. "Look, I can't just let you dump living cargo here. There are regulations about it is not living," another Draken interrupted. "Not truly. Look at it." Roy moved closer, curiosity pulling him forward. Inside the crate sat a small dragon, no bigger than a house cat. Its scales were pure white, not the deep reds and blacks typical of Draken. The creature trembled, pressing itself into the corner of the cage. Its eyes were pale blue, almost translucent. "An albino," Roy muttered. The red-scaled Draken turned to him. "A defect. It cannot see heat. It cannot hunt. Among my people, such things are mercy-killed before they suffer further." The small dragon's head lifted slightly at the sound of voices. It made no sound, but Roy saw something in those pale eyes. Not emptiness. Fear. "How much?" Roy asked. All 3 Drakens stared at him. The station manager's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me," the red-scaled one said. "How much to take it off your hands?" Roy pulled his credit chip from his pocket. "I'll cover the disposal fees and whatever docking costs you've got." The Draken exchanged glances. One of them laughed, a harsh scraping sound. "You want to buy a worthless hatchling? Human stupidity truly knows no bounds." "Maybe," Roy said, "but I've got the credits and you've got a problem. Seems like a fair trade." The negotiation took less than 5 minutes. The Draken were so eager to be rid of the creature, they barely haggled over price. Roy transferred 200 credits, signed some paperwork the station manager thrust at him, and found himself carrying a crate with a terrified dragon back to his workshop. He set the crate down gently on his workbench and opened the door. The dragon didn't move. It stayed pressed against the back wall, watching him with those strange pale eyes. "Hey there," Roy said softly. He pulled up a stool and sat down, making himself less threatening. "I'm Roy. I fix things. Broken ships, broken equipment, broken just about anything. And I'm guessing you feel pretty broken right now." The dragon blinked but didn't respond. Its small chest heaved with rapid breaths. Roy stood slowly and moved to his storage cabinet. He'd worked on enough alien ships to have a decent library of biological data. He pulled up the Draken files on his tablet and started reading. Most of it he knew already. Fire breathers, heat vision predators, social structure based on hunting prowess. Then he found a small note about albinism. Rare, considered effective. No recorded cases of survival past hatchling stage. Because nobody gave him a chance, Roy said to himself, he dug through his emergency supplies and found some dried meat. Not ideal for a dragon, but it was protein. He tore off a small piece and held it near the crate opening. The dragon's nostrils flared. It crept forward an inch, then stopped. "It's okay," Roy said. "I'm not going to hurt you. Not to throw you out. You're safe here." It took 20 minutes before the dragon finally snatched the meat from his fingers and retreated. Roy smiled. Progress. Over the next few hours, Roy cleared a corner of his workshop. He laid down some old thermal blankets and created a small enclosed space. Not a cage. Adin. He moved the dragon there carefully, crate and all, then left the door open. "Your choice when you come out," he told it. No pressure. He returned to his work, repairing a navigation console for a trader who'd be back in the morning. Every few minutes, he glanced at the corner. The white dragon had emerged from the crate and was sniffing the blankets cautiously. When Roy's comm chimed, he almost ignored it. But the message was from his friend Lisa, who ran the station cantina. "Heard you bought a dragon. Are you insane?" Roy typed back. "Probably, but it needed help. It's defective. The Draken were right to dump it. Everything works, Roy replied. Just not always the way you expect. He sat down to calm and looked back at the corner. The dragon had curled up on the blankets, though its eyes remained open and watchful. Roy grabbed another piece of meat and walked over slowly. He placed it on the floor a few feet from the dragon and backed away. This time the dragon took the food within seconds. That's better, Roy said. You'll need a name. Can't just call you dragon forever. The creature tilted its head, studying him. In the dim light of the workshop, its white scales seemed to glow faintly, like frost on metal in the early morning. Frost, Roy decided. That's what I'll call you. Frost. The dragon's tail twitched once. Not quite acknowledgement, but not rejection either. Roy pulled his stool closer to his workbench and picked up his tools. Well, Frost, welcome to the shop. It's not much, but we'll figure things out. We always do. Outside the window, ships came and went from Verge Point Station. Inside the workshop, a human mechanic and a rejected dragon began an unlikely partnership. Neither of them knew it yet, but that moment would change more than just their own lives. It would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about worth, value, and what it meant to be broken. Frost refused to eat for 2 days straight. Roy tried everything he could think of: fresh meat, dried rations, even some expensive draken delicacies he ordered from a passing merchant. The dragon sniffed each offering, then turned away and retreated to the corner den on the third morning. Roy sat cross-legged on the floor near Frost's space. The dragon watched him with those pale blue eyes, wary but curious. I don't know what you need, Roy admitted, but I'm going to figure it out. That's what I do. I figure things out. He pulled up his tablet and dove deeper into draken biology than he'd gone before, past the basic entries, into the research papers and obscure studies, most focused on typical draken physiology: heat vision, fire-breathing, pack hunting behaviors. Then he found something interesting. A paper written by a draken biologist who'd studied genetic variations. Buried in the footnotes was a single paragraph about albinism. The condition wasn't weakness. It was adaptation. Albino draken couldn't see infrared heat signatures like their relatives, but their regular vision compensated in low-light conditions. Their hearing became sharper, their sense of smell more refined. They weren't defective. They were different. Roy looked up from the tablet. Frost was still watching him. You're not broken, Roy said quietly. They just didn't understand you. He stood and walked to the workshop's environmental controls. The station kept everything bright and warm, standard settings for most species. He dimmed the lights gradually until the workshop was bathed in soft shadow. Not dark, but gentler. Frost's reaction was immediate. The dragon's posture changed. Its head lifted higher. Those pale eyes seemed to focus with new clarity. For the first time since arriving, Frost stepped fully out of the den and walked into the workshop proper. Roy stayed very still. The dragon moved past him, investigating the darker corners of the room with confidence it hadn't shown before. When Frost reached a stack of equipment in a shadowed alcove, the dragon navigated around it perfectly, never bumping or hesitating. You can see better in the dark, Roy breathed. That's your advantage. He grabbed a piece of meat and tossed it gently into the shadows near a toolbox. Frost's head swiveled immediately, tracking the sound. The dragon patted over and snatched the food, then looked back at Roy almost expectantly. Roy laughed. Okay, I get it now. Different environment, different rules. Over the next week, Roy adjusted his entire workshop schedule. He kept the lights dim during his main working hours. Frost began following him around, watching as he repaired circuits and replaced components. The dragon's confidence grew daily. It started making soft chirping sounds when content, a noise Roy learned meant approval. One afternoon, Roy dropped a small bolt while working on a thruster assembly. It rolled under a dark equipment shelf, too far back for Roy to reach easily. He groaned and got down on his knees, trying to see where it went. Frost appeared beside him. Before Roy could say anything, the dragon slipped under the shelf with fluid grace. Seconds later, Frost emerged with the bolt held carefully in its mouth. Thanks, Roy said, taking the bolt. Then something clicked in his mind. Wait, how did you see that so fast? He tested it again, deliberately dropping another bolt in the darkest corner of the shop. Frost retrieved it instantly. Roy tried 5 more times in different locations, including behind sealed crates and under metal grating. Every time, Frost found the object within moments. It's not just low-light vision, Roy muttered. Your other senses compensate too. He noticed Frost's ears twitching constantly, tracking sounds Roy couldn't even hear. The dragon's nostrils flared regularly, processing scents from across the workshop. Frost was reading the environment through multiple channels simultaneously. Roy thought about the dragon he'd met. They relied so heavily on heat vision for hunting that they'd never considered alternatives. To them, losing that one sense meant total disability. They couldn't imagine succeeding any other way. But you can, Roy said to Frost. You just need the right conditions. He started designing their workflow around Frost's abilities. When Roy needed to check wiring in dark ship compartments, Frost went first, finding the problem areas with superior vision. When mysterious rattles plagued engine systems, Frost's hearing pinpointed the source faster than any diagnostic tool. The dragon became an extension of Roy's work, a partner rather than a pet. Other residents of Verge Point noticed the change. They saw Roy and Frost moving through the station together, the white dragon no longer cowering but walking with purpose. Some found it strange. Others found it fascinating. Lisa stopped by the workshop one evening. She watched Frost helping Roy organize parts in dim lighting, sorting components by size with surprising precision. I was wrong, she said, about the dragon being defective. Roy looked up from his work. Frost was never defective, just misunderstood. The dragon would never admit that. Maybe not, Roy agreed. But that doesn't make it less true. Lisa left, and Roy turned back to Frost. The dragon had grown noticeably in 3 weeks. Now the size of a medium dog, with stronger limbs and a longer tail. Its white scales had developed a subtle iridescence, catching what little light existed and reflecting it in soft patterns. Roy scratched behind Frost's small horns. The dragon leaned into the touch, rumbling with contentment. It was a sound Roy had never heard from any dragon before. Trust, pure and simple. Tomorrow I've got to fix a busted sensor array on a cargo hauler, Roy said. Dark access tunnels, lots of tight spaces. Think you're up for it? Frost chirped twice, bright and eager. Roy smiled. Yeah, I thought you might be. He dimmed the lights further as evening fell over the station. Frost curled up in the den, finally comfortable enough to sleep deeply. Roy watched the dragon for a moment, thinking about all the things the galaxy considered broken or worthless. How many other lives were discarded simply because they didn't fit the expected pattern? We're going to change that, Roy whispered. One repair at a time. The alarm screamed through Verge Point Station at 3 in the morning. Roy bolted upright in his sleeping quarters, heart racing. Red emergency lights flickered through his window. His comm unit buzzed with an incoming message from Station Command. All personnel, main reactor experiencing cascade failure. Emergency power only. Repair teams report to Central Engineering immediately. Roy grabbed his tool belt and ran for the door. Frost was already waiting in the corridor, alert despite the chaos. The dragon had taken to sleeping near Roy's quarters, and the sound of the alarm had brought it to full awareness. They rushed through the station together. Other residents huddled in their rooms, faces pressed to windows. The emergency lighting cast everything in crimson shadow. Roy's mind raced through the possibilities. A reactor failure on a station this size meant life support would fail within 2 days if they couldn't fix it. Central Engineering was packed with people when Roy arrived. The chief engineer, a grizzled woman named Patricia Stone, stood over a holographic display of the station's power systems. Damage reports scrolled across multiple screens. Power surge from an external ship's faulty coupling, she explained to the assembled crowd. Fried half our primary systems before the breakers kicked in. The reactor's intact, but the distribution network is shredded. We need to access the lower maintenance tunnels and replace burned-out relay nodes. How many nodes? Someone asked. Patricia grimaced. At least 30, maybe more. And they're spread across 3 kilometers of tunnels that are now completely dark. Our standard lighting systems are part of what got fried. Roy studied the holographic map. The tunnel system was a maze of tight passages threading through the station's infrastructure. Crews would need portable lights, but even those wouldn't help much in some of the narrower sections. It would take days to map out all the damage. "I can do it," Roy said. Everyone turned to look at him. Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Roy, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but this is going to take Frost and I can do it," Roy continued. He gestured to the white dragon sitting calmly beside him. "The tunnels are dark. Frost sees better in darkness than any of us see in daylight. And Frost's hearing can detect damaged equipment from the sound alone." Patricia looked skeptical. "That's a dragon. A hatchling. That's my partner," Roy corrected. "And our best chance of mapping this fast enough to matter." The room fell silent. Patricia studied Frost with new attention. Several Draken workers stood near the back of the crowd. One of them, a female with copper-colored scales, stepped forward. "That is an albino," she said. "They are useless." "Really?" Roy met her gaze. "Then explain how Frost has been helping me repair ships for the past 3 months. Explain how yesterday Frost found a crack in a fuel line that my sensors completely missed. Explain how something useless keeps outperforming your expectations." The copper-scale Draken had no answer. Patricia made her decision. "Fine, you got authorization. But take a comm unit and check in every 30 minutes. If you run into trouble down there, we pull you out immediately." Roy nodded. "Understood." He and Frost descended into the maintenance tunnels 15 minutes later. The temperature dropped as they moved deeper. Emergency lighting gave way to complete darkness. Roy activated his headlamp, but the beam barely cut through the black. The tunnels were narrow, filled with pipes and conduits and machinery that created a confusing maze. Frost moved past him, suddenly confident. The dragon navigated the darkness like it was bright noon. Roy followed, trusting Frost to guide them. His headlamp illuminated the dragon's white scales, making Frost easy to track. They reached the first damaged relay node within 10 minutes. Roy examined the burnt components while Frost sat nearby, ears twitching. The dragon made a low chirping sound and tilted its head toward a junction box Roy hadn't noticed yet. "What is it?" Roy asked. Frost chirped again, more insistently. Roy climbed over some pipes and checked the junction box. The casing looked fine, but when he opened it, he found melted wiring inside. Without Frost's hearing, he would have missed it entirely. "Good catch," Roy said. They worked their way through the tunnel system methodically. Frost would lead them to each damaged section, using a combination of sight, sound, and smell to detect problems. Roy would mark the location and assess what parts they needed. Every 30 minutes, he checked in with Patricia, reporting their progress. Hours passed. The work was exhausting, cramped, and difficult, but they were covering ground far faster than any traditional crew could manage. By the time 12 hours had elapsed, they'd mapped 80% of the damaged systems. Roy's comm crackled. "Roy, this is Patricia. How are you holding up?" "Tired but functional," Roy replied. "We've got maybe 2 more hours of work left." "The station command is watching your feed," Patricia said. There was something strange in her voice. "They're impressed. We all are. I didn't think this was possible." Roy looked at Frost. The dragon sat patiently in the darkness, waiting for him to finish the call. Frost made it possible. Not me. They completed the mapping 16 hours after entering the tunnels. When Roy and Frost emerged into the central engineering bay, they found a crowd waiting. Patricia stood at the front, flanked by the station commander and most of the engineering staff. The commander stepped forward. He was an older human with gray hair and sharp eyes. "I owe you an apology, Roy." "And Frost. I doubted this would work." Roy shrugged. "Most people do. They see an albino dragon and think defective. They don't see the adaptations." One of the Draken workers from earlier approached slowly. The copper-scaled female. She looked at Frost with something between respect and confusion. "How is this possible? Our kind discards albinos because they cannot hunt." "They can hunt," Roy said. "Just not the way you expect. Frost doesn't need heat vision to find prey. Frost uses other tools. Better tools in some situations." The Draken had no response. She simply stared at Frost, perhaps reconsidering everything she'd been taught. Patricia clapped Roy on the shoulder. Thanks to you two, we can have the repairs done in 48 hours instead of a week. You saved the station. Roy smiled tiredly. Just doing our job. He and Frost left the engineering bay and headed back to the workshop. The station's emergency lights were already being replaced with standard lighting. People nodded respectfully as they passed. Word was spreading fast. When they reached the workshop, Roy dimmed the lights to Frost's preferred level. The dragon settled into the den with a satisfied rumble. Roy collapsed onto his cot. Not bad for a worthless hatchling, he said to Frost. The dragon chirped softly, already half asleep. Outside, Verge Point Station continued its repairs. But something had shifted. People had seen what was possible when you looked past surface judgments. They'd seen a dragon thrive in conditions where others would fail. They'd seen worth where they expected weakness. News traveled fast in the outer stations. Within a week of the reactor repair, Roy started getting requests from captains he'd never met. They specifically asked for him and Frost to handle their problems. Dark cargo holds with electrical issues. Mysterious mechanical sounds deep in ship hulls. Complex repairs in areas where standard lighting couldn't reach. Roy accepted the jobs that made sense and turned down the ones that felt like curiosity-seeking. Frost wasn't a show animal. The dragon was his partner, and Roy protected that relationship fiercely. 3 months after the reactor incident, a sleek diplomatic transport docked at Verge Point. The passenger manifest showed a Draken ambassador named Thorn. Roy was replacing a compressor unit when Patricia called him with a warning. Draken diplomat wants to see you and Frost, she said over the comm. Official business. He sounds angry. Roy set down his tools. Let him come. Thorn arrived 20 minutes later with an escort of 2 younger Draken warriors. The ambassador was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with dark purple scales that looked like polished metal. His golden eyes fixed on Frost immediately. The dragon sat near Roy's workbench, organizing small components by size. This is the albino, Thorn said. Not a question, an accusation. This is Frost, Roy corrected. My partner. Thorn circled the workshop slowly, studying Frost from every angle. The dragon watched him but didn't move. Roy felt pride at Frost's calm demeanor. 6 months ago, the dragon would have cowered. Now Frost met Thorn's gaze without flinching. You have made a mockery of my people, Thorn said, parading this defective creature as if it has value, spreading lies about its abilities. Roy crossed his arms. I haven't spread any lies. Everything Frost has accomplished is documented. Video records, witness statements, repair logs. All available for review. Impossible. Thorn's tail lashed. Albinos cannot function in normal environments. They lack the primary sense that makes Draken superior hunters. Without heat vision, they are helpless. Frost doesn't need heat vision, Roy said. Frost has other advantages. Better low-light sight, superior hearing, enhanced smell, different tools for different situations. Thorn made a dismissive sound. You use human technology to compensate for its weakness. Anyone can appear functional with enough artificial support. Roy felt anger rising, but kept his voice level. The reactor tunnels had no technology, just darkness and broken equipment. Frost navigated them perfectly while your kind would have stumbled blind. A convenient story. Thorn turned away from Frost. I have come to offer a solution to this embarrassment. I will take the albino back to Draken space, where it can be properly evaluated by our medical authorities. If, impossibly, your claims prove true, we will acknowledge it. If not, the creature will be disposed of with dignity. No, Roy said flatly. Thorn's eyes narrowed. You refuse. Frost isn't property to be handed over. And I don't trust your medical authorities to give a fair evaluation. They've already decided albinos are worthless. They'll see what they expect to see. The ambassador's scales rippled with suppressed rage. Then I challenged the albino. A traditional Draken hunt. If it succeeds by our standards, I will acknowledge its worth. If it fails, you surrender it to my custody. Roy's stomach tightened. What kind of hunt? Simple. Thorn smiled without warmth. We release prey animals on a suitable moon. The albino tracks and captures them using traditional methods. No human technology. No artificial advantages. Just the skills every proper Draken possesses naturally. Frost can't see heat signatures, Roy protested. You're designing this to be impossible. I am designing this to prove what I already know. The albino is defective. Your emotional attachment has clouded your judgment, human. This challenge will settle the matter definitively. Roy looked at Frost. The dragon met his eyes, calm and trusting. Roy's mind raced through options. If he refused, Thorn would claim Frost was a fraud. The ambassador had enough political weight to cause serious problems. But accepting meant risking Frost in a test designed for failure. I need conditions, Roy said finally. Frost gets 1 week to prepare. The hunt happens at a time and place I approve, and I'm present to observe. Thorn considered this. Acceptable, but you do not interfere once the hunt begins. The albino succeeds or fails on its own merits, and there will be Draken witnesses to ensure fairness. Agreed. They formalized the arrangement through station legal services. The hunt would take place on Grey Vale, a rocky moon with varied terrain. Thorn selected 3 prey animals known for their strong heat signatures. The test would begin at midday when heat vision would be most effective. 5 Draken witnesses would observe, and Roy could watch from a distance but not communicate with Frost. When Thorn left, Roy sat down heavily. Frost moved closer, pressing against his leg. I'm sorry, Roy said quietly. I know this isn't fair. The whole thing is rigged against you. Frost chirped softly. Roy spent the next week researching everything he could about Grey Vale. The moon had extensive cave systems, dense forests, rocky outcroppings. He studied the prey species Thorn had chosen. All of them were primarily active during the day and sheltered at night. All of them had strong heat signatures that made them easy targets for normal Draken. But Roy noticed something in the data. The prey animals were actually more vulnerable at night. They nested in groups for warmth. Their hearing was poor in darkness. A predator who could move silently through the dark would have significant advantages. You need to hunt at night, Roy told Frost. Use your strengths, not theirs. He practiced with Frost in darkened cargo bays. They worked on patience, on waiting for the right moment rather than rushing. Roy taught Frost to use sound and smell to track movement patterns. The dragon learned quickly, adapting hunting strategies that didn't rely on heat vision. Lisa visited the workshop 3 days before the hunt. She found Roy running Frost through another training exercise. People are taking bets, she said. Most think Frost will fail. What do you think? Roy asked. Lisa watched Frost moving silently through the shadows. I think Thorn has no idea what he's challenging. He sees a defective dragon. He doesn't see what you've helped Frost become. Roy smiled grimly. Let's hope you're right. The night before they left for Grey Vale, Roy couldn't sleep. He sat in his workshop with Frost curled nearby. The dragon seemed calm, almost peaceful. Roy envied that confidence. Tomorrow changes everything, Roy said. If you succeed, maybe other albinos get a chance. If you fail, Frost raised its head and looked at him. Those pale blue eyes held no fear, only determination. Roy reached out and scratched behind Frost's horns. Okay, we got this. Different doesn't mean defective. We just have to prove it. Grey Vale was cold and gray, exactly as its name promised. Roy stood on a rocky outcrop overlooking the designated hunting ground. Behind him, Thorn and 5 other Draken formed a line of judges. The ambassador looked smug. The other witnesses wore expressions ranging from curiosity to disdain. Below in the valley, 3 prey animals had been released an hour ago. They were called thermal runners, 6-legged creatures with naturally high body temperatures. Perfect targets for heat vision hunters. In traditional Draken hunts, young dragons tracked and caught them within minutes. Frost sat at the edge of the valley, white scales stark against the gray rocks. The dragon looked small compared to the vast terrain. Roy wanted to shout encouragement, but the rules forbade any communication. Frost was alone now. The trial begins, Thorn announced. He activated a timer on his wrist device. Traditional Draken hunt protocols. The albino has until sunset to capture all 3 prey animals. Failure to retrieve, even one, means complete failure. Roy checked his own chronometer. For hours, the sun hung high overhead, turning the valley into a heat signature paradise. Any normal draken could spot the prey instantly. Frost couldn't see any of it. Frost began moving down into the valley. The dragon's pace was slow, cautious. Roy's heart sank. To the draken witnesses, this looked like confusion, like a creature lost without its primary sense. Pathetic, one of the younger draken muttered. It wanders aimlessly. Thorn said nothing, but his satisfaction was evident. An hour passed. Frost continued moving through the valley, sometimes stopping to test the air. The dragon investigated rocky areas and small caves, but there was no sign of the prey. They'd scattered after release, using the terrain to their advantage. The albino cannot track without heat vision, another witness declared. This is pointless. Roy bit his tongue. He noticed something the dragon didn't. Frost wasn't wandering. The dragon was mapping the valley, learning the terrain, finding the places where prey might shelter. Patient. Methodical point, 2 hours gone. Frost had moved to the western edge of the valley, where a cave system opened into the rocks. The dragon paused at the entrance, head tilted, listening. Then Frost sat down. It has given up, Thorn said. As expected. The trial isn't over, Roy countered. Frost has 2 hours left. 2 hours of watching it do nothing. But Thorn kept the timer running. The sun began its descent toward the horizon. Shadows lengthened across the valley. The temperature dropped. Roy saw Frost's posture shift slightly. More alert, more focused. As dusk approached, Frost finally moved. The dragon slipped into the cave's system with fluid grace. Disappeared into the darkness. Now it hides in shame, a witness said. Roy said nothing. He understood what Frost was doing. The prey animals had excellent heat vision, but poor night sight. As darkness fell, they'd seek shelter in groups for warmth. The caves were the logical choice. Frost had waited all day for this moment. 30 minutes of sunset remained when Frost emerged from the caves. The dragon had something in its jaws, moved with careful precision back across the valley floor. Behind Frost, 2 more shapes followed reluctantly. All 3 thermal runners, alive and unhurt. The draken witnesses stood in shocked silence. Frost brought the prey to the base of the outcrop where the judges stood. Set them down gently. The creatures were confused but unharmed. In traditional hunts, young draken killed their prey. Frost had captured all 3 alive. Thorn's jaw worked soundlessly. Finally, he found words. This is impossible. The albino cannot see heat signatures. How to track them? Frost didn't track them, Roy said. Frost outsmarted them. Waited until they'd sheltered in the caves for the night. Used darkness as an advantage. Used superior low-light vision and hearing to locate them. Then herded them out instead of attacking. It violated the spirit of the hunt, Thorn protested. Traditional methods require heat vision tracking during daylight hours. You said capture 3 prey by sunset, Roy countered. Nothing about methods. Nothing about timing. Frost met your conditions exactly. The oldest draken present stepped forward. Her scales were faded green with age. Roy had learned her name was Scale Mother, an elder from one of the founding clutches. She studied Frost carefully. I have killed 4 albinos in my lifetime, she said quietly. All eyes turned to her. Drown them in the hatching pools before they could suffer. It is what we do, what we have always done. She moved closer to Frost. The dragon met her gaze without fear. But I wonder now, Scale Mother continued, if I killed potential rather than weakness. This young one has proven skill. Not draken skill, but skill nonetheless. Success achieved through adaptation rather than tradition. The challenge specifically required traditional draken methods, Thorn insisted. The challenge required success, Scale Mother corrected. This albino succeeded. It demonstrated intelligence, patience, and mastery of environment. These are worthy traits. To claim failure because the method differs from ours is to value tradition over truth. The other witnesses murmured agreement. Even the younger draken who'd mocked Frost earlier looked uncertain now. Thorn's tail lashed in agitation. This sets a dangerous precedent. If we acknowledge the albino, we question our entire cultural approach to such creatures. Perhaps we should question it, Scale Mother said. How many talents have we drowned in the name of purity? How many adaptations have we rejected because they differed from our standard? She turned to Frost, lowered her head in a gesture Roy recognized as Draken respect. I acknowledge your worth, White One. You have proven yourself through capability. One by one, the other witnesses followed her lead. Only Thorn remained standing rigid, unwilling to bend. This changes nothing, the ambassador said. One successful hunt does not erase fundamental defects. Then let me offer you truth, Roy said. He climbed down from the outcrop and stood beside Frost. The only defect here is rigid thinking. Frost thrives because I created an environment that valued differences instead of punishing them. Your culture could do the same, but that would require admitting you've been wrong for generations. Thorn had no answer. He turned and walked toward his transport ship without another word. But the other witnesses remained. They circled Frost, examining the dragon with new perspective. The Scale Mother approached Roy. You are human. Your kind adapts to anything. You saw value where we saw waste. This is worth learning from. Roy scratched behind Frost's horns. The dragon leaned into the touch, rumbling with satisfaction. Frost taught me as much as I taught Frost. Maybe that's the real lesson. We learn from what we protect instead of discard. The sun set completely over Greyvale. The trial was over. Frost had won, not by following the expected path, but by forging a new one. And in doing so, had challenged an entire species to reconsider what they thought they knew about strength, worth, and survival. 6 months after the hunt on Greyvale, Roy's workshop had become something different. No longer just a repair bay. Now, it was a consultation hub where beings from across the sector came seeking answers about their own rejected members. Frost had grown into full adulthood. The dragon's white scales gleamed with health, body now as large as a small shuttle. Those pale blue eyes held wisdom beyond years. Frost moved through the station with confidence, no longer the cowering hatchling Roy had rescued. The first albino hatchlings arrived on a Tuesday. A Draken couple landed their small transport and stood nervously outside Roy's workshop. The male held a crate. Inside were 2 tiny white dragons, barely a week old. Both trembled against each other. We heard what you did, the female Draken said. Her name was Emberwing, and her voice shook. About the white one who succeeded. We couldn't kill ours, but we don't know how to raise them. Roy took the crate gently. Frost moved closer, peering inside at the hatchlings. They stopped trembling when they saw another albino. Recognition, perhaps. Or hope. First thing you need to know, Roy said, is that they're not defective. They're adapted. Different tools for different jobs. He spent 3 hours with Emberwing and her mate. Explained about low-light environments. About enhanced hearing and smell. About patience and understanding different hunting methods. The couple listened intently, taking notes on their data tablets. When they left, they carried detailed care instructions and a promise. Roy would help them learn, and if they struggled, they could return. Word spread fast through Draken space. Not everyone believed. Many traditionalists like Thorn still insisted albinos were genetic failures. But enough had seen the footage from Greyvale. Enough had heard Scale Mother's testimony. 3 more families arrived within the month, all carrying albino hatchlings they couldn't bring themselves to kill. Roy trained them. Frost became their demonstration model, showing what albinos could achieve with proper support. The white dragon taught the hatchlings to navigate darkness, to trust senses beyond heat vision, to find confidence in being different. Lisa stopped by one afternoon and found Roy's workshop filled with activity. 5 albino dragons of various ages worked on different tasks. Frost supervised them like a mentor, gently correcting mistakes and offering encouragement through chirps and body language. You've started a movement, Lisa said. Roy looked up from helping a young albino practice fine motor control by sorting small components. I just fixed what was broken. The system, not the dragons. Same thing. A message came through on Roy's comm, official seal from the Galactic Council. He opened it cautiously. The Council rarely contacted individual citizens. The message was an offer. The Council wanted Roy to establish a formal program. A consultation service for species dealing with genetic variations they didn't understand. Full funding, official recognition, access to resources across known space. The goal was to prevent waste of potential life. Roy read it twice before responding. I accept on one condition. Frost is listed as co-director, not assistant. Equal partner in all decisions. The council agreed within an hour. The program launched 3 months later. Roy and Frost took on cases from dozens of species. A Quillen engineer with reversed bioluminescence, rejected by her light-based society, but perfect for deep space salvage operations. A Vex warrior with oversensitive hearing, deemed too weak for combat, but invaluable as a scout. A human child with synesthesia so intense it disabled them in normal schools, but made them a prodigy at pattern recognition. Each case followed the same principle. Different wasn't effective. It just required different applications. 1 year after Greyvale, Thorn returned to Verge Point. Roy saw the ambassador's ship dock and felt old anger resurface. But when Thorn entered the workshop, the Draken's demeanor had changed. Less arrogant, more uncertain. I came to admit error, Thorn said without preamble. My clutch sister hatched an albino last month. She came to me asking for help, asking if I knew the human who saved the white dragon. Roy waited. I told her I didn't think you'd help me. Thorn continued. That I'd treated you and your dragon with contempt. That I'd try to prove the albino worthless. He looked at Frost. I was wrong. Not just about the albino, about the value of rigid tradition over observable truth. Frost approached Thorn. The dragon was now larger than the ambassador. Frost could have intimidated or threatened. Instead, the dragon lowered its head in the Draken gesture of greeting. Offering respect despite past conflict, Thorn returned the gesture. Will you help my clutch sister? Will you teach her how to raise her white daughter? Yes, Roy said. And we'll teach you too, if you're willing to learn. Thorn stayed on Verge Point for 2 weeks. He observed Roy and Frost's methods, learned about environmental adaptation and sensory compensation. When he left, he carried supplies, instructions, and something more valuable, a changed perspective. Scale Mother visited soon after. The old Draken had become an advocate for the albino program. She traveled to clutch worlds educating parents about alternatives to drowning. For albinos I killed, she told Roy, I cannot bring them back, but I can ensure no more die from ignorance. 53 albino hatchlings have been saved this year alone because of what you started. Roy shook his head. What Frost started? I just paid attention. 2 years after the rescue, Roy stood in his expanded workshop. It now occupied an entire station wing. 20 different species worked there, each once considered effective by their own kind. Frost moved among them, confident and calm, the anchor of the entire operation until his ship landed outside. Another family seeking help. Roy grabbed his tablet and headed for the airlock. Frost followed, as always. What's the case today? Lisa asked, passing them in the corridor. Roy checked the details. Rigellian youth with backwards growing spines. Family thinks it's deformity. I think it's potential. You always do. Roy smiled. That's kind of the point. He reached the airlock where a worried Rigellian family waited. They held a small child carefully, protecting others from the unusual spine configuration. The child looked frightened. Roy knelt down to the child's level. Frost moved beside him, white scales gleaming in the station lights. The child's eyes widened at seeing the massive dragon. Hi there, Roy said gently. I'm Roy. This is Frost. We fix things. Want to know a secret? The child nodded hesitantly. You're not broken, Roy said. You just haven't found the right situation yet. But we will, because that's what we do here. We find we're different kinds of amazing fit. Frost rumbled agreement. Behind them, the workshop hummed with activity. Beings from across the galaxy worked together, each one proof that rejection didn't equal worthlessness. That difference held value. That sometimes the bravest thing was to question what everyone assumed was true. Roy Chun had rescued one dragon from a cage. That dragon had helped rescue dozens more from societies that couldn't see past genetic expectations. And together they'd built something radical. A place where being different wasn't just accepted. It was celebrated. The workshop sign above the airlock read, Chun and Frost Solutions. Everything has potential. And below it, added recently by popular request, We don't fix what's broken. We discover what works.